Hello, hello. Today is Monday, and I'm recording the podcast on the day it will be released because I was at a training all weekend called Intuitive Speaking Live with Danielle Louise Ross, and I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in doing more speaking off script. It was an amazing weekend, but because of that and my school schedule, I am just now getting this podcast episode out. So, recording live here on Facebook, and I will be posting it just as soon as I'm done. So, I wanted to share a little bit today about what it is exactly that I do. So it's kind of funny. Last year, I went to a local SENG conference supporting the emotional needs of the gifted, and I met up with a couple of people in my online Facebook community at lunch. And somebody who had been a follower of the podcast, a member of my online community, as we were sitting there talking at lunch, she asked me, "So, what exactly do you do?" And I realized at that time that I had not really done a very good job of communicating, even on the podcast, what exactly it is that I do outside of this podcast. Because of course, the podcast alone is not really a business. It's just something that I do that I absolutely love, and around this, I am supporting the other work that I do. But I really don't often make it super clear what that is. So as I say in my intro about assessment, educational assessment, and consultation, and my online community, I've talked a lot about the Embracing Intensity community. That is one part that I'm really working on growing this year, building the community, creating community events, both online and local. But the educational assessment part of it is something that I haven't really explained a lot on my podcast or even online. And I realized the main reason that I haven't talked a lot about it is because I think of it as kind of a local thing, because most of my clients are in this area because it has to be in person to do that assessment. So the community, the coaching, all of that stuff can be done online, but the educational assessment has to be in Washington, in my location. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't talked about it very much on the podcast. But just this past week, I had two serious inquiries and two curious inquiries about adult educational assessment. And that's something that I've been really wanting to explore further. I've done a little bit of it in the past. Of course, my main focus has been on school-aged kids because that's where I work. But adult educational assessment is something that I've really been wanting to branch out into, and I'm taking steps towards really coming up with a comprehensive approach to adult assessment as well. So what that assessment looks at, hi Anne-Louise, what the assessment that I do is specifically psychoeducational assessment. So what is that? What is psychoeducational assessment? It consists of a couple of parts. One is cognitive testing, which is IQ or potential. What I usually use is the WISC or the WACE, which is the adult version. And it really looks at not only your IQ, but also your processing strengths and weaknesses. And that's one place where my approach is very different, I think, than a lot of people who do that assessment, because a lot of times they're just looking at what is the IQ, is there a gap between your IQ and your reading, writing, and math to look for a learning disability? But I dig a lot deeper to look at processing strengths and weaknesses. And that's something that I learned in my education in California. And interestingly, when I was assessed in Washington as a college student, I got the response of, well, why did you even take this test? Because I scored so high on everything. But what they didn't really get at is the fact that when you have certain skills that are extremely high, then even an average score is a weakness. And so even though I didn't score below average on anything, I had a 50-point gap between my visual processing, which is up here, and my auditory processing, which was down here, and certain things that were affected by my executive functioning. And so really years later, when I got my degree, I was able to go back to my previous testing and really gain some information about how I thought and learned in a way that was already there in the data, but not everybody can interpret it. And so, in addition to doing educational assessment on my own, I also offer some consultation if you have an assessment and you don't know how to make sense of it. I did this with a family last year, and just the information that I gave her from analyzing her existing test data, she said was more than the information she'd gotten from the school in 6 years. And she did end up doing more testing with me, but even just the consultation part was enough to really gain a better understanding of how her kid learned. And so the two things that I do mostly with the educational assessment and consultation is I look at your IQ or cognitive ability. I look at the specific areas of academic achievement, so reading, writing, and math. And sometimes adults aren't necessarily looking for that, or if you're looking for just, is my kid gifted, then perhaps looking at the reading, writing, and math isn't that useful. But where it can be useful, for example, is in my own son. I had him tested cognitively before I really was comfortable with a diagnosis of ADHD, because I really wanted to see how much was gifted bored and how much was legitimate executive functioning issues. And looking at the split between his scores, he definitely had a weakness in his efficiency of processing information, processing speed, and working memory. And that's a very common pattern with ADHD. And just this past year, I did some experimental testing with him on a new academic test that I just got. And we did the whole thing, which I don't always do. So it was 4.5 hours of testing with him. And so much of it was equally high to his cognitive ability. But what I did not know was that even though his reading comprehension and reading fluency, silent reading fluency, was really, really high, his reading at the basic word level in isolation was not that high. It was only in the high average range, which was a huge gap for him. And his ability to edit was really, really bad. Like, he did not notice really basic things. And so where I thought that he was just rushing through his writing assignments and just not paying attention to detail because he was rushing through, it was actually more than that. He's a really big picture thinker. He gets the reading in context, but at the word level, it's not as easy for him. And with the writing, he gets the big picture, but he misses those details. So when he can't edit his work, it's not just because he's rushing through, it's because he literally does not see the detail to the same degree as his other skills. And so those are some things that you can learn when you do the educational assessment, because you can really break down what's going on in certain areas of our brain. And so that's why it's been so helpful for me. And as I've gotten more inquiries about adult assessment, I thought, it's not just about school. It's not just about can we achieve in our school setting, but how can we understand how we think and learn in a way that is helpful to us in the rest of our life. So if you have any questions about educational assessment or educational consultation on an existing assessment, feel free to contact me. You can contact me through the website or a link in the show notes, and we can chat about whether I can help you out at all in understanding your kids' learning strengths and weaknesses better, or understanding your own. There's some other things that we can do to look at that. So if you're curious, feel free to contact me. And then the other thing, when it comes to what exactly it is that I do, that I'm moving into this year, is that I really have been working on building the Embracing Intensity community online. And one of the things that I realized as I went through this intuitive speaking training is she talked about 3 different types of speakers: storytellers, teachers, and facilitators. And while I approach a lot of my things as a teacher, I've come to realize that I'm really at heart a facilitator. And that really came home to me this past year when I did 2 separate trainings on nonviolent crisis intervention and supporting the emotional needs of the gifted family groups. When I did the facilitation part, I actually, both times, 2 separate, totally separate types of things, I had people come up to me afterwards and tell me how exceptionally good I was at the facilitation part. And that's something that I really want to own in my classes, in my coursework, in my group calls, and in live events, is that facilitation is where I really want to bring more facilitation into my work. And so I'm going to be working on bringing that into our group calls more, and also bringing it into my course. So right now, if you join the Embracing Intensity community, you can access the Ignite Your Power course as a part of the community membership. And in the new year, 2020, I have some really great ideas on how to completely revamp that course in a way that is going to be awesome. But if you join now, you can actually be a part of the development of the upgraded course. So if you join us in the Embracing Intensity community, you can go through the existing course as it is, which has some really great information, really great connections with other people who've gone through it. And you can also help contribute to how it's going to be even more fantastic in the new year. So come join us in the Embracing Intensity community, embracingintensity.com. And if you want to learn more about educational assessment, consultation, or just how to use your brain in a positive way and how to find your strengths and weaknesses, send me a message and we can talk and see if I can be of any help. Have a great day. Bye-bye.